My name is Clara, I'm 27, and up until 6 weeks ago, I was just another small-town kindergarten teacher, scraping by on my modest salary, living in a tiny apartment with thrift store furniture and second-hand books stacked to the ceiling. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. What made it special were the weekends and summers I spent with the two people who actually raised me, my grandparents, Margaret and Henry. They taught me values that had nothing to do with wealth: honesty, humility, kindness. Ironically, though, they were extremely wealthy. You would never know it from the way they lived, clipping coupons, driving the same old pickup for decades, and gardening in worn boots. They always told me, "Money is a tool, Clara, not a crown. It should help, not rule." 6 weeks ago, everything changed in a single phone call. My grandparents were killed instantly in a horrific car crash caused by a drunk driver. The grief was unbearable. The funeral was a blur of crocodile tears from relatives who had barely visited them in years. My parents, Leonard and Sylvia, handled the arrangements like it was a business deal, fighting the funeral director over expenses while my brother, Derek, scrolled on his phone. My Aunt Carol staged dramatic sobs for the camera and stopped the moment no one was watching. They hadn't cared in years, but now they acted as if they were heartbroken. 2 weeks later, their lawyer, Samuel Price, called. He asked me and the rest of my family to come for the reading of the will. I went, expecting nothing. The others went, expecting everything. The morning was gray, the air heavy. When I arrived, Samuel greeted me kindly. He had been my grandparents' trusted attorney and friend for decades. Then the rest of my family filed in: my father Leonard, stiff and stern, always chasing corporate success; my mother Sylvia, wrapped in designer brands; Derek, smug and careless; Aunt Carol and her quiet husband Martin, both whispering like vultures. When Samuel began reading, the room went still. My grandparents had left everything, every cent of their $26 million fortune, the house, the businesses, the properties, to me. And they had explicitly excluded everyone else, stating clearly they had already provided for them during their lives and had their reasons documented. The silence broke like glass. My father jumped up, demanding to see the papers, shouting that it had to be a mistake. My mother sneered that I, a kindergarten teacher, could never handle that kind of wealth. Derek slammed the table, ranting about how he needed startup capital for his doomed ventures. Aunt Carol turned red, accusing me of tricking my grandparents. Samuel remained calm and played a video message my grandparents had recorded. There they were, alive on screen, smiling gently. They explained everything: how they had grown disillusioned with their children's obsession with money, how they had documented years of entitlement, neglect, and disrespect. They said I was the only one who had shown genuine love and responsibility. They wanted me to carry their values forward. The moment the video ended, my father exploded, vowing to contest the will. Samuel calmly told him it would be nearly impossible. They had anticipated this and secured extensive medical evaluations, proving their soundness of mind. The meeting ended in chaos, threats, and accusations. As I left, my father gripped my arm tightly, hissing, "This isn't over. You'll come to the house tonight. 6 o'clock. We'll settle this as a family." His tone was not a request. That evening, I walked into their enormous, cold house. They were waiting like predators. My father laid out his proposal, his demand, really. I was to sign over everything. In return, he would give me 10%, which he called more than generous. Derek whined for millions to fund another scheme. Aunt Carol argued she should get the house for her kids. My mother smiled thinly, telling me I'd get enough for a down payment on a proper house. They tried guilt, threats, manipulation. Finally, my father's voice hardened. Either I signed, or I would be cut off completely. I remembered my grandfather's words, "No one can take your dignity unless you hand it over." My heart pounded, but I found my voice. "No," I said, "I won't sign anything. They trusted me. I'll honor their wishes." The room erupted, shouting, insults, tears. My father slammed his glass, shattering it. Then he gave his ultimatum: either I surrendered the inheritance or I was no longer family. My refusal sealed it. He laughed bitterly, saying I had no home anyway, because the apartment lease I thought was mine was actually owned by one of his companies. My mother smirked, telling me I had 30 minutes to pack before the locks were changed. Derek sneered, saying my millions wouldn't keep me warm tonight. I left with 3 bags and a broken heart. Outside, with nowhere else to go, I remembered Samuel's envelope. Inside were keys, the keys to my grandparents' mansion. Shaking, I drove there. The house smelled the same, lemon and cedarwood like them. I collapsed in the guest room and cried myself to sleep. The next morning, my phone buzzed with threatening texts from my family. Derek even wrote, "Enjoy the mansion while you can, not for long." I forwarded it to Samuel, who told me to stay put. He was coming. Within the hour, he arrived, along with Carlos, my grandparents' longtime groundskeeper, who had lived quietly in the guest house for years. Carlos revealed that he had updated the security system and had footage of my father and brother sneaking into the house after the funeral, stealing jewelry and electronics. Then he showed me my grandmother's journals, page after page detailing decades of my parents' greed, demands, and manipulation, contrasted with the warmth she described in our simple Sunday dinners together. By midday, more of my grandparents' true allies arrived. Their housekeeper, Dorothy, who hugged me tightly and whispered that I looked just like Grandma. Rosa, their business partner, who promised to guide me through the company. George, their financial advisor, with carefully organized portfolios. Neighbors who brought food and stories. They all came, not because of money, but because they had genuinely loved my grandparents. Then a message came from Derek. Tomorrow morning at 10, they were coming to the mansion to take what was theirs. Samuel nodded grimly and made calls. "Your grandparents planned for this," he told me. "Tomorrow, we'll be ready." The next morning, the mansion filled with allies. Rosa set up documents at the dining table. Dorothy bustled in the kitchen. Carlos stood guard at the door. Then, one by one, my family's cars pulled up. My father's sleek sedan, my mother's luxury SUV, my aunt's convertible, Derek's flashy car. They barged in, demanding I hand everything over. But waiting for them were not just me and Samuel. Judge Henderson, an old friend of my grandparents, was there. So was Police Chief Wilson, whose daughter had received a scholarship from my grandparents' charity. Longtime employees stood silently behind me. One by one, Samuel, Rosa, and George laid out evidence of my family's greed and failed schemes. Records of unpaid loans, attempts to declare my grandmother incompetent, even footage of them stealing after the funeral. My parents paled as the judge reminded them he had been asked to oversee disputes. The police chief warned that any attempt to seize property would be treated as theft. For the first time, my parents were speechless. Samuel handed them thick envelopes, cease and desist orders, legal notices, and the documented evidence that would go public if they fought me. My aunt fumed. Derek muttered threats, but the weight of the truth broke them. One by one, they backed out the door, their threats hollow, their entitlement shattered. The house filled with relief. Dorothy served coffee as if to wash away the poison. Judge Henderson told me softly, "Your grandparents would be proud, not for the money you defended, but for the dignity with which you defended it." 6 months have passed since that day. I used a portion of the inheritance to start the Margaret and Henry Foundation for Education, funding scholarships and resources for underprivileged students. I returned to teaching, pouring resources into my classroom, giving my students the tools my grandparents would have wanted them to have. The mansion, once empty and heavy with grief, became a home again, filled with chosen family: Rosa, Samuel, Carlos, Dorothy, and others who had truly cared. My biological family has tried reaching out, my father asking for loans, my mother angling for a board seat on the foundation, Derek begging for startup capital again. I held firm. Unless they respected my grandparents' wishes and let go of their greed, I wanted nothing to do with them. I often visit my grandparents' graves, telling them about the foundation, the scholarships, the lives being changed. I tell them I finally understand it was never about the money. It was about using what they built to make the world better. That's the legacy they left me. And it's the one I will carry forward, no matter who tries to take it away.